Hey, this is Connor from Biker's Edge. Today we're talking about the Allied BC40. So Allied is a brand new brand for us here at the shop, and it's actually kind of a brand new brand in most places. Allied got their start making road and gravel bikes, and back in 2019 their bikes kind of rose to stardom when they won both the men's and women's category of Unbound Gravel. Since then, Allied has been adding new bikes to their lineup, which brings us to today, the BC40, Allied's first mountain bike. This is an American-made full suspension mountain bike that kind of blurs the lines between XC race and trail. So is it the right bike for you? Stick around to find out. We're going to cover some high-level details of the bike here. If you want all of it, go to Allied's website. That's easy enough. The BC40 rolls on two 29-inch wheels. It has 120 millimeters of travel front and back, and it's designed to be fast and light, with our extra large test bike coming in at 25.5 pounds. The bike's geometry also reflects that light and fast mantra, with a 66.5 degree head tube angle, 1241 millimeter wheelbase, although the reach is a healthy 501 millimeters, and it has 435 millimeter chainstays. Our test bike is a bit of a custom build, dressed to the nines with top-of-the-line RockShox suspension, Shimano XTR drivetrain, and brakes. It has an NV cockpit and wheels, and it does have an immaculate color shift paint job. It is incredible. Like, oof, so nice. So how does it ride? Let's get into it. So the BC40 is one of those rocket ship bikes. It makes you want to pedal faster and faster because the bike rewards you for it by going faster and faster. It comes equipped with lockout levers, although I have no idea why, because it is one of those lockout levers be damned sort of bikes. It is incredibly fast and efficient. It is as efficient as I would ever want a bike to be. And in fact, when I was in some of the rougher and rockier terrain, I would not have hated just a little bit more traction and control. When I was on the smoother stuff, it was perfect for hammering at a fast pace for me, which is probably slow for everybody else. It is firm and efficient with very little to zero pedal bob at all. It uses a flex stay suspension design rather than something more complex for weight savings. It's simply lighter because you don't have extra pivots or links or bearings, and that's becoming a more and more popular thing to do these days. And most of those bikes that have a flex stay design end up being pretty quick and snappy pedalers. The BC40 is no exception. The BC40's geometry and body position while climbing is fairly comfortable for how quickly this bike goes uphill and how XC it feels in that suspension design. Most XC bikes, or bikes that feel this XC, tend to have a little bit more aggressive, weight shifted forward, more stretched out posture, which my old man spine does not appreciate. So I actually found the BC40 to be very comfortable. But it's not so comfortable that the handling suffers because of it. It is still very easy to keep the front wheel down, weight over that wheel so you've got traction and control. And the word that keeps coming to mind about the handling is sharp. The handling is just very precise and quick, which allows for a very active riding style. It makes it the kind of bike that's easy to change lines, unweight, go around the pointy things that will shred your tires. It just makes for a very good handling bike. So overall, the BC40 is an excellent blend of the XC and trail categories with very XC feeling suspension and a little more relaxed trail feeling geometry. I think it would be an excellent true grit bike. It's got the comfort to last you all day, but it has the efficiency that you're not gassed and that you can go all day. Plus, that little bit more relaxed geometry goes a very long way on the downhills. So I tend to ride mid to long travel trail bikes. It suits how I like to ride a bike and the trails I like to ride better. So it's no surprise that when I jump on a short travel bike like this, I'm a little bit timid. And I usually spend the first 20 minutes out on a bike like this, freaking out, scared to corner, scared to go over a bump bigger than a baseball. But that was not the case with the BC40. It has some of the quickest, sharpest, fastest handling of any bike I've ridden without the squirrely nature that often comes with those things. So that firm suspension feel on the climbs also shows through on the downhills. It is not the plushest or the most forgiving bike. You do end up feeling quite a bit of the trail chatter, which is kind of to be expected. And it's also beneficial for how this bike is designed to ride and where it was designed to ride. So there's very little to no energy lost when you're pumping the terrain to gain speed or you're trying to pedal to get back up to speed out of a corner. There's no energy lost, and that really helps keep the average speeds high. And you have to keep in mind where this bike was designed in Arkansas. The trails are different than our trails here in Utah. It's not up for an hour and a half to come down for 20 minutes. It's more rolling terrain with a lot of ups and downs mixed in all together. And in that style of terrain, that firm, efficient suspension platform is going to do a great job of making you go faster on the bike. So the handling on the BC40 was certainly the star of the show. It is so fast, so responsive, and so engaging to ride. But it does it all in a way that's not squirrely or twitchy or scary. And I don't know what magic that is, but it's some sort of magic. Has to be. I immediately grabbed this bike, and being me, I went and hit some jumps and drops and trails that probably were not what Allied had in mind when they built this bike. But it did it surprisingly well. The bike was never my excuse to not hit a feature. I hit everything that I'd normally hit on my big bike, on this little bike, and it did it all very, very well. I didn't feel like I had to go slower or not hit the jumps or the drops or not have fun because this bike was a little XC bike. It hangs very well. And I'm not trying to say that that's what this bike was designed to do, so yeah, go hit all the jumps and drops. I'm just trying to say it doesn't feel sketchy or scary or squirrely at all. So overall on the descents, I found the BC40 to be pretty surprising in how quick and sharp that handling was without any of that squirrely nature. I would not hesitate to ride it on tougher trails up here in northern Utah, as well as the rough, rocky southern Utah desert trails. I would ride Zen on it all day, or Barrel, or Captain Ahab. I'd go ride those tougher, nastier trails on it without hesitation. I swore off endurance racing and riding. Face it, I wasn't fast enough to call it racing a long time ago. But if I ever had to do that style of riding again, I know the first bike I'd grab. So there are a lot of bikes that come to mind when thinking about comparisons with the BC40. So this part's going to be pretty fun. The very first bike that comes to mind is the Ibis Ripley. And I couldn't stop thinking about the Ripley while I was riding the BC40. It wasn't until I got home that I found out why, and I think it's because the geometry is almost identical, like within tenths of a degree and a couple of millimeters here and there. The suspension feel on those bikes is very different though. The Ripley is a little plusher, more forgiving, offers a lot more traction. The BC40 is a lot more XC. It's super firm, super fast, and efficient. It's almost more like the XC suspension platform with Ripley geometry. So I do think the BC40 climbs much quicker than a Ripley, and the Ripley is a little bit more confident and capable on the downhill. I wonder how much of that is to do with the tires that come with it and the bigger, burlier fork. So I mentioned it before, now we need to compare it to the Ibis XE. They both have a very, very similar suspension feel. The kind of bikes that have lockouts but definitely don't need them. They're super efficient and super fast. So even with 20 millimeters more rear travel, I would not hesitate to put the BC40 up against the Ibis XE. They have that same fast, firm, efficient suspension feel to them. On the downhill, I think the BC40 is the more sure-footed and capable descender, although it's kind of close and there are trade-offs. The XE is a little bit steeper, but it's significantly longer. The BC40 is slacker, but shorter. I don't know if there's actually a huge difference between them, but I do think the BC40 is a little bit more capable. Now, this brings us to the Rocky Mountain Element. That bike has kind of the same principle as the BC40, but just taken to the extremes. XC suspension platform, and almost all mountain geometry. So the BC40 can't hang in the capability and stability department with the Rocky Mountain Element, but it is a faster, more agile climber and descender. It's a little bit more XC and a little bit less trail. And last but not least, we have the Transition Spur. And again, this comparison makes sense because on paper, these two bikes are very, very similar. 120 millimeters of travel, almost identical geometry, flex stays, and they actually ride very similar as well. The Spur does have a bit more trail feeling to it than the BC40. If I had to go ride scary stuff or challenging terrain, I would probably grab the Spur. But if I wanted to be the first guy to the top of the mountain, I'd take the BC40. So who is it for? According to Allied, the BC40 is made for hundreds of miles of single track in their backyard. And I've been to their backyard. I have ridden the Back 40 trail network, which is where the BC40 gets its name. Those trails have a lot of up and down, a lot of punchy climbs, a lot of limestone and greasy rocks, as well as some really fast, smooth terrain. And the BC40 is designed exactly for that. A lot of mixed and variable conditions, both up and down, and all mixed in and jumbled together. It's the kind of bike where the average speeds are just going to be high and they're going to stay there. If you want a stupid fast bike to rip your friend's legs off, or just to keep up with your freakishly fast kids, you're going to like the BC40. It has that XC race-like feel without the sketchy, squirrely twitchiness that often comes with it. So what is the bottom line on the Allied BC40? It is the ultimate bike for doing long, long days in mixed terrain. Thanks for sticking around. We'll see you next time.